I'm Jonathan Larson with TYTI Investigates, and if you haven't seen it yet, there's a story out there that's getting increasing attention about a woman named Tara Reade. Said she used to work for Biden back in the 90s, Joe Biden, the current presidential candidate, back when he was in the Senate, and she claims that he sexually assaulted her. She's given very specific details, which I'm not going to get into here, but they're out there if you're interested in exactly what she says he did. And it absolutely, by the way, falls into the category of criminal sexual assault, assuming he did it. It is not, my point is, it is not one of these cases where he's been seen on camera multiple times over his career touching women inappropriately, if it's not with their consent, in public. Their shoulders, getting in their hair, all kinds of violations of personal boundaries. I wanted to, there's a lot to unpack here. I wanted to start off with a couple things that Biden has said last year when some of these allegations, not of assault per se, but about inappropriate touching that made women feel uncomfortable. He offered a non-apology apology where he talked about his behavior and he said some admirable things. I'm not sure they were admirable in the context of constituting his defense, but they were generally sentiments that we would want people to express. I'm going to read some of them right now. He said, "I have offered countless handshakes, hugs, expressions of affection, support, and comfort, and not once, never, did I believe I acted inappropriately. If it is suggested I did so, I will listen respectfully, but it was never my intention. I may not recall these moments the same way, and I may be surprised at what I hear, but we have arrived at an important time when women feel they can and should relate their experiences, and men should pay attention, and I will." There's a little more I want to get to, but I do want to make the point that he says, first of all, you don't have to believe you acted inappropriately. That's not a prerequisite. Thinking that your intention alone, if it's good, is exculpatory, that's a part of the problem that Biden does not seem to have recognized yet. He also says, I will listen respectfully. He says men should pay attention, and I will. But he has not, so far at least, either personally, publicly, or through his campaign, responded to what Tara Reade has had to say. And that includes media, respected, credible media outlets going to the Biden campaign and saying, this is what she says. And by the way, she's not a faceless set of quotes in an article. She spoke on Katie Halper's podcast. She spoke on Rising, Hill TV, on camera. So she is out there herself. You don't have to take any media outlet's word for it. You can just listen to her. But here's the other thing I really wanted to drive at. This was, again, was part of Biden's statement last year. He said, quote, "Social norms have begun to change. They've shifted, and the boundaries of protecting personal space have been reset, and I get it." Social norms have begun to change. Here's what we need from a leader. We don't need a leader to recognize when social norms change under their feet. We need leaders who recognize when social norms should change. It was entirely knowable back in 1992, whenever it was that these first incidents occurred. It was entirely knowable at the time that the social norms were determined by, were shaped by white dudes, generally older white dudes who held the power. And they thought it was okay to touch women without their consent when their intention did not meet their standards of wrongdoing. It was entirely knowable, or should have been knowable, that women may not have agreed, that women were not being served by the social norms of the time. This has been the ongoing moral endeavor of humanity, right? Is to recognize, is to be able to reject the determinative force of social norms and to say, no, that's not a good norm. So the fact that you're capable of recognizing after the fact when other people have succeeded in to some measure change what the social norms are, the fact that you can recognize it after other people who had less power than you did, who had fewer resources than you did, to recognize that they succeeded in undoing the norms that you were honoring and never questioning because they served you just fine, that's the opposite of leadership. That's just not being an entirely oblivious idiot. No credit for the simple fact of not being an entirely oblivious idiot. Your job, if you want to be a leader of other people, is to recognize, to have the capacity to question the prevailing social norms and to do the work of finding out whether they are serving everyone. It's not good enough decades later to say, oh, how about that? If it's pass-fail, you fail. Another aspect about the coverage that we're starting to see and have seen, right? She's gotten some attention in the past when her claims were of a less explosive nature. They were more in keeping with what we knew publicly about how Joe Biden behaved. And there's been reporting about the fact that she supports Bernie Sanders. I think she's been supportive of other politicians as well, but I don't remember who they are. She also spoke glowingly about Vladimir Putin. And the point I wanted to make about this is that it is a natural impulse. It is a positive thing, a good thing for journalists to act on curiosity about people who are going to become public figures because they are making allegations, sexual or criminal or otherwise, against public figures. It is an appropriate task for journalists to assemble a public profile of who is this person. But what ends up happening too often is that assemblage of the humanizing, of making the project of making these alleged victims three-dimensional, what ends up happening is it becomes tea leaf reading, meaning that the endeavor becomes to look for things that appear to be evidence of dishonesty or motive for dishonesty. And what I want to read what I wrote down, I'm quoting myself here. That stuff, especially in the context of assessing her or his truthfulness or their truthfulness, it's only relevant if there is already evidence that they are lying. In which case, it might explain why they're lying. Maybe that gives us some insight into their motives. But if there is no reason to think they are lying, the fact that they might have motive to lie is not in and of itself evidence of possible dishonesty. So why are we talking about it? The only possible reason, in the absence of evidence of dishonesty, is this notion, which we see years all the time aimed at people of color, that you must be a perfect victim. That I'm not going to believe you unless your political views align perfectly with mine, and unless your past can survive every degree of scrutiny, which, by the way, mine cannot. Hugely imperfect person here. So, I don't know if there are perfect people out there, but I guess we're supposed to hope that they become the victims whose victimhood will change future norms. But again, my point is, it makes no sense to interrogate Tara Reade's political leanings, her geopolitical assessments. No matters in the absence of she is lying. If there's no reason to think she is lying, it doesn't make sense to explain why she's lying. So stop it. Okay. At some point, this is, by the way, Media Analysis Friday, which, of course, just hugely off the charts, gets use the highest number of clicks. I'm totally lying, fake news. Self-indulgent, and I talk about the media. And you folks indulge me as well, so you're indulgent. So one thing I think about is, when do we pick up on these stories, and what shapes our decision making about when to pick up on them? And I've had some exchanges with Katie Halper in the past. I don't know her. I don't know her well. I don't have a good sense of whether, she has like a history of like fringe opinions or anything like that. I have no idea. My experiences with her have been positive, all of that to the best of my record. But when I first saw her tweeting out her podcast interview with Tara Reade, I hesitated. And I want to talk a little, meaning I hesitated to retweet it, to give it oxygen, to potentially associate myself with it. There were reasons, right? Not good reasons, not morally good reasons, but not irrational reasons either, to be wary of it, to be worried about passing it on, giving it more oxygen. And I want to talk about some of the bad reasons that are in here, but are just out there as well. And I'm not saying that all of these, bad reasons applied to my thinking at the time. It was literally just like a moment's hesitation of, what do I do with this? So one common thing is the right is going to flog this, meaning the right wing, Republicans, Trump, they're all going to go to town with this. And the thing you have to understand about that is, too bad. Other people get to have opinions about things. That doesn't mean that we are not still obliged to amplify those facts. And I don't mean the fact that Joe Biden did it. I mean the fact that there's an allegation that he did it. That is a fact. That we know. There is a woman whose story checks out in terms of her having worked for Joe Biden, who is willing to speak publicly, name, face, details. Those are facts. The fact that they are inconvenient does not change whatever moral obligations we have about dealing with them. The fact that other people might benefit from that does not change our obligation to deal with it. And that takes us to, of course, we don't know exactly how that plays out. Does it maybe hurt Trump by reminding people, oh yeah, he's like a double-digit accused rapist? We have no idea. But again, the fact that Trump may or may not use it, maybe or maybe not to his benefit, we're not allowed to try to manipulate the future like that. We have a process. We as humans, I don't mean even the media anymore, we as humans have an obligation to process information in a way that is just and equitable, and not put our thumb on the scale because we think this is going to have some political impact or not. But that leads us to the question of the fact that Trump is quite clearly, he's a self-admitted, on tape abuser of women. Does the fact that we know that about him make it more or less necessary to tolerate it in the guy who is seeking to replace him? Meaning, if Donald Trump is a rapist and Joe Biden is an accused rapist, does that mean you should not support Biden? Or does it mean you should support him more because Trump is worse? And if you think I'm going to solve the political calculus for you here, I'm afraid you're mistaken. I have my own thoughts on it, but I also don't think we should judge other people, especially people who have a personal investment in this issue. I think we have to understand that people are going to and should be able to come to different answers on that. But it is something that I think we need to think about. It's not. Well, let me read the other note I made for myself, which goes back to my own hesitation in talking about this, which is that when we give oxygen to, when we lend presumptive credibility to allegations like this, it can hurt if you are doing it in a way that potentially hurts someone you admire, whether it's Bill Clinton, Joe Biden, or any number of other male politicians. And that is part of the problem of admiring these people too much, of putting too much stock in them. When we put them up on a pedestal, when we worship them, when we make heroes out of them, Barack Obama, who's never had a hint of anything like this, or anyone else, right? Or however pure they are publicly, when we idolize these people, we create in ourselves a reluctance to hear the allegations against them, and that's a problem. Okay. I think that's pretty much all I had to say about this for now. I actually had a few more things, but I realize I've gone on for quite a while, and I can see in the chat that you guys are that you guys have quite a few things to say about this. So let's. The reason, if you're new, the reason I do this live every day is so that we can have a conversation. It helps me be a better journalist. Helps keep me, accountable in at least some small measure. So if you are new, I hope you'll subscribe, and I hope you'll join the chat and join the conversation. Okay, let's go to what folks have to say. Weena Jensen says, hello, I love your frozen face. So the thumbnail is just me looking dumb when I don't have something that's a little more pertinent to drop in there as a thumbnail. I will probably replace it. So if you see the frozen face remark in the comments, it refers to the thumbnail I had there as a placeholder. All right, let's get into the substance. Weena Jensen says, remember the clip where Biden is on stage somewhere with friends and sneaks in on a friend's wife and caresses her shoulders? The poor lady frowned and looked scared. Well, yeah, of course, totally understandable. April Dawn Bennett reminds everyone to please hit the like button, which it seems like that's pure ego fulfillment. And yes, that is the most important reason to do it. But it also actually helps us. The more likes we get, the more that kind of jukes the algorithm and makes YouTube go, oh, well, apparently people are liking this video. So we'll show it, we'll offer it to more people, more viewers. So that helps us. So thank you, April Dawn Bennett, for reminding people that hitting the like button has a real effect on us. I'm going to skip some of the TMI personal comments in here. Katie Kane says, I liked the video and the chat stopped. Well, obviously that's not good, but it's a sacrifice. It's worth it, and I appreciate you making it, Katie. Jess says, I have such empathy for any person who tells their truth in the face of those who refuse to recognize truth. Curious Cleo says, she said, I believe this is referring to Tara. Tara Reade said she voted for Obama and Hillary. She doesn't hate Biden and believes in him in some ways politically, but she's a Bernie fan. Yeah, and she's written critically about Biden's politics and all that. But again, the only substantive reason to talk about her political beliefs is to sort of interrogate the notion of, well, would she have a political motive? And motive is not an appropriate area to interrogate until there's a crime. And if there's no evidence that she's lying, Biden hasn't even denied it, right? Mr. I will listen to the women. I will, what was the exact quote? Men should pay attention. I will pay attention, he said. He's not paying attention now, although I guarantee you internally they are paying quite a bit of attention. But they're not responding to her. They are not having the minimum level of respect for Tara Reade, for women generally, for the populace generally, to say, no, that's not true, or, you know what, I'm preparing a statement. Sarah says, when women come forward to report sexual assault, it ends up being that their character is assassinated. And again, that's part of what we feed when we engage in the game of motive speculation. There's no cause to interrogate someone's motive when there is no crime. The police cannot come up to me and start saying, hey, do you hate your neighbor over there? Is it true he borrowed money from you or something? If the neighbor hasn't been physically assaulted or robbed or whatever, there's no crime to interrogate my motive, right? If there's no evidence that Tara Reade is lying, what are we doing talking about her motive to lie? Kalita says, and people wonder why it takes so long for women to find the courage to step forward. And most, I would venture, do not. I remember when I was a college student, it was sort of my first time talking to women, young girls in some cases, obviously my age, I mean, but it was the first time hearing, like, from woman after woman, girl after girl, their personal stories of having been assaulted, abused, raped by men, by boys. And it was like one after another. I was hearing stories from people, and it made me realize that, I mean, to use the terminology of the day, it was epidemic. It was epidemic. And that in dealing with women, I started to assume that any woman I was talking to, odds were someone at some point had said something, had put their hands on her, had forced her to do something. One of those three, the odds were in favor of that being the reality of any woman I spoke with. And by the way, I came to that realization before Joe Biden, at a time when Joe Biden was still saying, hey, those were the norms of the time. And I'm not that bright. Dornaire says, I think it makes sense to not support your abuser for president. I think that's a minimum floor that we can accommodate people with. I think that's fair. Curious Cleo says, I believe her too. It sounds like too many encounters I've been in. Weena Jensen says, there seems to be something about men and drive, the drive to succeed, the drive to win, the drive to fight, and the drive to get through difficult times, and maybe a powerful sexual drive. So maybe this is going to be a little controversial and get me in trouble here, but I've been thinking for a while now, especially as a parent who has to think about how to talk to his male child at some point eventually about sexual interactions with other people. Of whatever gender. And the sort of benchmark that we're all given is consent, right? The idea that if you're engaged in physical contact of a sexual nature with another person, there must be consent there. And I sort of accepted that as a given, as an obvious thing for a long, long time. And it's not wrong, but is that the best we can do? Like, is someone putting up with reluctantly agreeing to let you touch them? Is that a vision of sexuality that we want to bequeath to anyone, let alone our kids? It seems to me that the bottom line for any kind of sexual interaction ought to be not consent, but desire, which obviously implies consent. Like, if they're not into it, if they don't want it, not just agree to it, but want it, what are you doing there? Like, at a minimum, even if you're scum, even if you're a total D-bag, like, have some pride. Like, if you're a crappy human being, at least be proud enough not to want to touch someone who's just letting you. Like, what the hell is that as a minimum standard for whether you'll engage in sexual activity with someone? Oh, how'd your date go with so-and-so last night? Well, they let me do stuff. What is that? Sorry, I got off on a tangent. Tom Grossman says, no one should be surprised by this. This incident happened a year or so after Biden's role in the Clarence Thomas hearings. It's of a piece. Well, I would hope that does make it more of a surprise. I mean, it's a good point, Tom, and I appreciate you putting it in the timeline, but you would think after the Clarence Thomas hearings, where very quote unquote small things were illuminated as capable of forming a much bigger, more oppressive systemic pattern, right? Tiny little remarks, which were sort of goofily scandalous in isolation, Biden oversaw the testimony where it became clear that those tiny, tiny little remarks were the bricks and mortar of the walls and the ceilings and the prison cells around women in the workplace, in society. Acer says, please don't do this to Brother Biden. So I'm not sure what to do about that. And then says TYT equals The Intercept. First of all, that's very kind of you to say. The Intercept has a lot of really prestigious, veteran, respected, prize-winning journalists on their staff. So thank you for the compliment. But also, when we say don't do this to Brother Biden, what exactly are we supposed to do, right? I heard the same thing when I was reporting about what Black people and white people were telling me about how people of color got treated in South Bend. I was told over and over again, don't do this, it helps Trump, etc., etc. So you tell me whose voices we're not supposed to listen to, right? Who do we sacrifice, right? Trump wants us to sacrifice old people for the economy. You want us to sacrifice Tara Reade for Joe Biden. Why is it we have to sacrifice all these people? The answer is we don't, and we shouldn't, and we're not going to. I heard from Republicans and Democrats in South Bend about the way Pete Buttigieg dealt with people of color. And the fact of their party affiliation or the color of their skin, whatever it might be, none of that means you're not entitled to a voice anymore. We are all entitled to voices. And Brother Biden, by the way, ought to be out there and is out there, has been out there publicly saying exactly the opposite. You're saying, please don't do this to Brother Biden. Here's what he says. Never did I believe I acted inappropriately. If it is suggested I did so, I will listen respectfully. He's saying, come forward. He's saying, if you say something about what I did, I will listen respectfully. So he ought to be out there saying she needs to have a voice. Tara Reade needs to have a voice. And if you support Biden, then you ought to support his sentiment on this issue as well. So you ought to be out there saying she has a voice. But if not, then at the minimum, tell us who has to shut the hell up, right? Who has to shut the hell up because you know how politically this is going to play out. And no one can criticize our daddy gods, right? So if you want to say, I shouldn't do this, you tell me, who don't I listen to, right? I'm not supposed to listen to Black people in South Bend. I'm not supposed to listen to Republicans in South Bend. I'm not supposed to listen to female Bernie supporters, I guess now. Who else? Like, let's just give us the list. Give us the full list of whose voices get shut down anytime there's an election. And, maybe it would be helpful to give us a calendar of when exactly we're allowed to listen to people who don't hold power. As far as I'm concerned, that's 24/7, 365. Acer, I'm not even going to. Acer says, who comes out 36 years later? He's run for president 3 times. Again, the 36 years thing only makes sense, only matters if she's lying. We don't have any reason to think she's lying. The fact that she waited 36 years has no bearing on whether she's telling the truth or not. Did you think so with Brett Kavanaugh? Right? That the accusations against him coming decades later were untruthful? And again, you tell me when an accusation becomes untrue, right? How long does a woman have before you decide, now you're a liar? If you speak up now, you're a liar. If you spoke up yesterday, I would have believed you. But you know what? You waited too long. You tell us, give us that scale, right? And if it's a sliding scale, right? You've got 1 week if he touches your hair, 1 month if he smells your hair, 2 months if he puts his hand between your legs, and you know what? I'll give you 5 whole years if he rapes you. You tell us what that scale looks like. Aesir says the accuser works for The Intercept. No, she does not. She spoke to The Intercept. Very different. She has spoken to lots of outlets. Take away everything The Intercept has had to say about this, has reported about this, and the story still stands in all of the particulars that we've discussed. Curious Cleo says Tara Reade came out with her story when no one believed another woman who tried recently, and she had a similar experience, and she was trying to support and defend women coming forward, regardless of when. Haka Harvey writes, Trump did it 63 times at least. To be honest, I appreciate you putting the number in there. I can't even vouch for it. I literally lost track of the number of people in specific incidents. And by the way, there are lawsuits now. I'm blanking on the name of the woman. It's a high-profile woman who is suing him, and it's making its way through court. And at some point or another, we're going to get a lot of very real details about what happened there, in addition to the details we already have. Sarah says, between Trump, Bernie, and Biden, Bernie is the only one that doesn't have a list of women accusing him of sexual assault or rape or harassment. Kalita says, Tara Reade tried to get the word out for months and she was silenced. She is a brave woman who will have to relive that experience every time people ask her to tell what happened. Alicia points out, read Ryan Grimm's piece. This is the Intercept article that was referred to earlier. She has tried to come out before. There's more to it. So that the article refers to, she went to Time's Up seeking help, and the organization which exists to help women pursue claims like this against powerful people, powerful men. She was told, she says, that Time's Up said, well, we're a nonprofit and it would constitute political activity to go after a presidential candidate. That charitably is one legal interpretation of the law. A little less charitably and more realistically is that is entirely BS. There are nonprofits out there which do nothing but go after political figures and candidates. So the idea that we're going to go after powerful people, but not the people who actually hold the most power because they literally write the rules, that's I'm not saying they made it up, but if if they genuinely see their mission that way, that's deeply problematic. Aesir says, TYT is happy to destroy a good man with lies. So here's the thing about destroying people and quote unquote lies. First of all, we're not reporting this story. The woman herself is. You don't have to take anyone's word that she says this. She's out there on camera, on audio, talking to The Hill, talking to Katie Halper. There's no one reporting this, that she isn't anything that she isn't already saying herself. Secondly, what the hell's a good man, right? You know, there are any number of positions Joe Biden has taken that have wrought destruction on people's lives. And they were part of the norm at the time, right? The crime bill, any number of things. I'm sure he was on board with welfare reform, any number of things. So don't come at me with good man, right? I don't know what the hell's in anyone's heart. All I can do is judge what they've done and what they've said. That's it. And if you don't want to know, that's fine. But you know what? This is America, and people are supposed to want to know what the politicians they're being asked to vote for did and said, and the impact those two things had on other people's lives. That's the job of being American. So if you know that someone is lying here, give us the evidence. Give us the evidence. That's the job, right? And in terms of TYT specifically, I spent almost a year reporting on Pete Buttigieg, and I kept getting told one time after another, you're only doing this to help Bernie Sanders. You're only doing this to help Bernie Sanders. And I pointed out more than once that there was no evidence that going after a centrist, if that's what you want to call it, going after as opposed to reporting on, that reporting on or going after a centrist politician would help Bernie Sanders. And what happened virtually the instant Pete Buttigieg, along with Amy Klobuchar, left the race? Joe Biden exploded. So you tell me where exactly I helped Bernie Sanders. The point of reporting, the point of journalism, the point I was making earlier about pursuing the facts is you don't get to game the process because you think you know how it's going to result. We are obliged as human beings, as fact-based reasoning creatures, we are obliged to determine what is true about things that matter and to share that information with people who also have cause to want to know that. That's the job. And if you don't like that it gets messy, if you don't like that your good man suffers as a result, then you're in the wrong place. I don't want to say, America, love it or leave it, but that's the project of this country, is not to put people up on pedestals, is to find out what is true, what is not true about the things that matter. That's what we're here to do. I hope that's what you're here to do. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through all the in the chat today right now. Weena Jensen says, sarcastically, I'm sure, maybe we have Biden amongst us in the chat. The arguments seem just as well structured as Biden's. Well, I mean, part of the problem with Biden's arguments is that they seemed reasonable. They were generally taken as relatively reasonable when he made them. And as I said at the top of the video, they miss the glaring big point of this, which is if we can't count on national leaders to be the ones to recognize when norms are out of whack, then who's supposed to do that work? Chaz Bennett says Tara Reade has been silenced by media for years. I will say, Chaz, I honestly don't know. I literally have no information on whether she has spent years trying to get this out or whether she's only approached the press on specific occasions over the years. So I don't know to what extent she actually has been silenced by media, but it's going to be very interesting to see what kind of pickup it gets. And my own prediction is that this first, as far as I'm aware, started getting talked about on the left. Katie Halper's podcast, I think, was the first I saw of it. And I, as I confessed, I was hesitant. I hesitated at first to retweet it, but it's also now getting more and more attention on the right. And my guess is that it'll actually follow that route to the mainstream. Once the right expresses its interest in it, validates it, and raises the implicit threat that media will now get hammered by the right for ignoring the story, now I would guess we're going to see the mainstream media talk about it. Not because the left started talking about it, not because Tara Reade herself started talking about it, but because the right wing validated the story and raised the implication that media would get hammered by the right for ignoring it. Biden has a town hall on coronavirus tonight. I believe it's on CNN. It is, in their defense, a single topic town hall. So they have that claim, they have that defense that they can say, we didn't bring it up because we told everyone beforehand this would be solely about coronavirus. My guess is, and I used to work at CNN, and I've worked in other newsrooms and TV as well. My guess is there's a discussion happening right now about whether or not to ask Biden about this at the town hall. Weena Jensen says, oh wow, I think someone just got slammed by JL. To be clear, my intention is not to slam humans. My intention is to slam poor reasoning, toxic claims, irresponsible rhetoric, all of that stuff. So if I slammed a human being in the process, I apologize to Aesir or anyone else. I didn't mean to suggest that you personally are a bad human being, but you can do better. All right, I totally lost you guys. Sorry, I'm trying to find my place now. You guys went way ahead of me. I keep scrolling slowly and nope, I'm not catching up to you guys. Let's see. There's no way I'm getting to all your comments. Acer says, I usually love your videos, but come on. So look, I get it. I get it. It's scary to introduce anything into the bloodstream that looks like it's a threat to the one guy that people are now counting on to take out Trump. That is a scary enterprise. But we ended up with Trump by honoring that kind of thinking. Oh, we just got a super chat donation from Pear. 200 kroner. That's, let's see, what would that be? 100 kroner would be what? I don't even know. What is that? 100 kroner, 10 kroner? I don't even know. Is that like 20 bucks maybe? Maybe a little less than 20 bucks? Thank you, Pear, who I believe is in Sweden, if memory serves. Thank you very much for the super chat. And if you, I know Cenk has talked lately on the show about how, you know, small businesses, including TYT, this is a hard time for everyone. So if you can help TYT financially, that's amazing. That's amazing. It makes it possible for us to do the work that you're supporting us to do. But if you can't support TYT financially, please know that you have our equal gratitude for the ways you do support us, with your eyeballs, with your commentary, with your feedback, with sharing our voices, the amplification you do. All of that matters, all of that helps us. So thank you, Per, but thank you everyone else as well. There is no way I'm getting to all of this stuff, guys. Wow, you are on fire today. Kalita says, it angers me so much how many powerful men and women get away with so much abuse. Acer says, Bernie Sanders supporters are trying to destroy Biden because Bernie can't win a goddamn state. So look, there's a lot of factual claims in there that are either true or they're not true. You say they're trying to destroy Biden. How do you know that anyone's doing that, right? Are you suggesting that this claim is only coming forward because of that? Like, how do you know? If you don't know something to be a fact, it's irresponsible and toxic to speculate that you do, to speak as if you have information about this stuff. That's what our president does, right? He's got a feeling we'll get a vaccine. He's pretty sure that the coronavirus will be gone any day now. Alan M. says, cannot vote for the lesser rapist. Sarah says, is any mainstream media reporting this? I think JL, that's me, said earlier, but I didn't catch it. So I haven't seen it. And I did, you know, do a Google News search this morning just to see what kind of stuff popped up. The equivalent of, you know, mainstream media on the right, meaning not just Breitbart or whatever, but, you know, semi-respectable right-wing Republican outlets, they're talking about this for sure. I have yet to see it, I think, in any of the mainstream corporate media. But my guess is by the end of the day, we will. Peter Zelenkov says, calling Biden a good man might be too much. This was a guy who liked working with segregationists. And I just think that overall framing of assessing, let alone thinking you can assess whether someone's a good man or not, or a bad man. That's not how humans work, and we should stop trying to slot humans into those categories. That's not, outside fiction, right? I wrote a science fiction webcomic that's actually out there on the interwebs somewhere. And I tried really hard to make sure that the bad guy, the really horrible thing doing bad guy, had a story that he told himself in which he was not a bad guy. And it's a really important thing, I think, to keep in mind, because no one wakes up and thinks, I'm going to go do evil today. Okay, yes, a statistically insignificant proportion of people think exactly that. But the problem isn't the people who think that way. The problem is that they get other people to believe them and to follow them based on the stories they tell to justify those things. Tobias kicks in €5 and says, I appreciate your work so much. Thank you. Thank you, Tobias. That I literally just got a chill here. Thank you so much. Regardless of the amount, the fact that anyone takes the time to just to click through and execute that, regardless of what amount you folks put in, that's just amazing to me. And that's the closest to an atheist miracle I can think of outside childbirth in my family. So thank you. Curious Cleo responds to Aesir, I hope I'm saying that correctly, and says, I understand your feelings and you have a point, but it's so hard to come forward. Harder still against someone powerful, no matter when. But coming forward to help others who had the same is not being duplicitous. It's just trying to get the truth about a powerful person out there. That's how I feel anyway. And here's, I certainly applaud that, Cleo. And the addendum that I would attach to that is this. When you say publicly, chat room or on national television, whatever it is, when you say publicly that she waited 36 years and time's up, you're not allowed to talk anymore, think about the message that says to everyone else who's wondering whether or not to tell their story. Imagine that you're sending the signal to them that the clock is ticking. Your credibility meter is slowly ticking down. With each second that goes by, you're getting less credible. What are you telling that person? Are you telling them to speak out or shut up? So whatever doubts you may have about the person du jour, please try to honor the struggle that tomorrow's person du jour is going through right this moment. Okay, I am... I'm emotionally exhausted from whatever slamming I was doing earlier. So let's see if I can get to a few more. Tom Grossman says, this won't just go away if we all just close our eyes. Would you prefer we all wait for Trump to use it? That's the other basic point about the primary, right? The entire point of the primary process is specifically to surface damaging things, whether it's peccadillos, scandals, crimes, whatever it is. The whole point is, let's find out now who's got them so that we can send the best candidate possible into the arena against their champion. It's nuts when people act like we should start baseball season with the baseball season? Is that what you call it? With the World Series, right? Why do we have to have all this fighting amongst the teams, right? We should just send the right National League team against the right American League team. Why do we weaken these teams by having them play games and injure themselves and wear themselves out and get older? We should just go right to the World Series. You're missing the point. You're missing the point in a way that suggests you fundamentally misunderstood the entire project of America. The point of America is to fight and to argue and to engage in conflict with each other about things that matter, because that's how you get to the right answers, to a better place, to a more perfect union. That's how we do it, not a bug. That's the feature. I said earlier this week that political discourse, political debate, political fighting is not a luxury that you ditch in times of crisis. It is the thing that gets you through times of crisis. It is the thing that, if you do it right, prevents times of crisis, mitigates times of crisis. It does not mean we are not unified. We are grown-ups. You are allowed to disagree with each other and still be on the same side. That's how it's supposed to work. Democrats are supposed to fight with Republicans, but also with Democrats. Progressives are supposed to fight with blue dogs, but also with progressives. No one is perfect. No one is an Einstein-level genius. We're all going to get stuff wrong. The way we reduce the impact of our individual wrongness is by testing it against not just our enemies, but our allies, and having them say, yo, that's messed up. Here's why. I'm still on your side. That's why I'm telling you this is messed up. We have to keep fighting. Not till it's over, to keep going. A dingo ate me baby, there's your mood switch for you, writes in the chat, even, and then there's a mean name for Biden. Even Biden said we should believe women. That's right. That's right. If you're on Biden's side, well, go look at what he had to say. He said not only that we should listen, but he would listen. Okay. He's had a chance to listen now. I am 100% sure. I shouldn't say that. It's possible that no one around him has mentioned, oh, there's a podcast out there that you really should listen to. It's possible. But the Biden institution, I guarantee you, is aware. I mean, we know they're aware because the media have reported that they went to the Biden campaign and said, what about this? And the answer so far has been, oh, Doug Grinberg says that IBT, International Business Times, has a Biden Reade article. So that's sufficiently early that maybe they were working on it even before the Republican websites were saying something about it. A. Sear says TYT didn't believe Sister Warren. So I'm not sure what you mean when you say TYT didn't believe. TYT isn't a thing that has one set of beliefs. TYT is a company, right? It's a media outlet that has people on the air who disagree with each other all the time. They clearly believe different things. My own personal belief was that each of them, Warren and Sanders, came away from that encounter with a different understanding of what was said in that encounter. You know when else that happens? Always, all the time, right? That is endemic to the imperfection of human communication, right? So you can't say I didn't believe her. I believed that she genuinely had that interpretation of what was said, and I believed it was possible she was right. Maybe Bernie misspoke. Maybe he said something in a way that most reasonable people would interpret in a way that was different from the way he intended it. You know who does that all the time? Everybody. Me, right now, in this video. I'm going to be misunderstood by people 10 times, and probably 8 of those times, it'll be my fault for being imprecise in my expression. I use pronouns way too often. Specifically, Jonathan uses pronouns way too often. And that makes it hard to understand me sometimes, to understand Jonathan, that is. So it's ridiculous, it's absurd on the face to say TYT didn't believe her. I'm sure there are some people out there who said, I believe Sanders. But they're not TYT. They're part of TYT. A. Sear says, innocent until proven guilty. That's right. It's right in a court of law. It doesn't oblige us in the public sphere of applying that same presumption of innocence, although I think it's generally a good dictum to follow. And it's fair to say that Joe Biden is entitled to the presumption of innocence. But here's the thing. So is Tara Reade, okay? So it's okay if you don't say that I believe every single thing that she said is factually true exactly the way you say it. But when we say I believe her, or I believe women, At a minimum, what that has to mean is they deserve the presumption of credibility, which means the claims cannot be dismissed because you don't like them. The claims cannot be dismissed because you disagreed with them politically or because you found out that they like Vladimir Putin. Those things are evidence of motive, and as we just talked about earlier, evidence of motive does not constitute evidence of a crime. First, you've got to show that she's lying. And by the way, if there's no reason to even look for a reason she's lying, then you assume she's telling the truth. And then you go to Joe Biden and you say, what about it? And that's what people have done. And Joe Biden's response so far has been, and it's not like Joe Biden can't talk. Acer says Trump got away with rape. And that's a bad thing, right? If we don't like the fact that the right wing, that Republicans let Trump get away with that, nominated a man who was credibly accused multiple times of rape, sexual assault, admitted it, his own guilt on tape. If we don't like the fact that they let him get away with it, why on earth would we advocate that Democrats do the same thing? Acer says, yeah, courage to come forward and tell lies. Yeah, that takes BALLS. Well, yeah, it would. It would take a lot, right? Let's say you're Tara Reade, and you've come up with this lie. Wouldn't you be absolutely terrified to go on national television, even if it is the internet? The Hills show airs online, but it's nationally seen. It's seen by powerful people. To go out there and tell a blatant lie about one of the most powerful people in the country? Well, why wouldn't that be scary to you? Of course it's scary. And that goes to her credibility. The fact that the results of lying could be so horrifically bad, that makes it more plausible that she's telling the truth. But again, she deserves the presumption of innocence just as much as Joe Biden does, which means you have to presume there's something there and we need to find out what it is. That doesn't mean you assume Biden's guilty. It means you do the process, you run the facts, you do the investigation, you find out the truth. You're the one saying don't do that. Okay, guys, I'm running out of pea and vinegar here. So I'm sorry I didn't get to everything you guys have to say. I'm seeing a lot of angst and anger. And one thing I would ask is, and I'm guilty of it too, is that when we have this discourse, even though so much is on the line, at an individual level for Tara Reade and for Joe Biden, and at a macro level for the United States of America and the world, it's really important that we police ourselves in the way we talk about this. And the way we talk about everything, right? Good man, bad man, it's not helpful. I don't think I ever personally insulted a seer, for instance. But I'm sure I came close, and I probably came too close to the line. But it's really important that we be able to have a discourse that allows for well-intentioned mistakes in the way we talk about things, so on and so forth. No one's going to improve their behavior if the only message they get is you're a bad person, as opposed to you've screwed up, here's how you can do better. So let's try to approach this discourse in the spirit of helping each other to do better. And by that, I certainly include myself in those ranks. So let's all help each other to do better. Let's take care of each other. Let's take care of ourselves. And, you know, let's, in terms of the coronavirus, we're not at the peak. We've not gone through the worst of it. We've not gone through the most stressful of it. We've not gone through the most anxiety causing of it. So hang in there, but remember, it is not permanent. This too shall pass. We are probably going to screw up, continue to screw up. We already have in ways that will extend it, but it will pass at some point. So hang in there. And it's really important that we try to be good to each other in the interim, especially when we disagree on the important stuff. So, Aesir, take care of yourself. Everyone else, take care of yourselves. And let's try to take care of each other, especially when we disagree. I'll see you on Monday. Bye, guys.